Hello, creative ones, and welcome to the finale of Mixed Media Art Fundamentals, where we are putting it all together. Now, I'm Michelle, Creative Director at Mixed Media Art, and I'm so excited to be bringing you this project now that we've gone through all those fundamentals and we're going to put it together in a project. Now, whether you're watching this here live or a replay, make sure you give us a like, a thumbs up, pop your questions in the comments, and of course, subscribe and share us with your crafty friends. Now, this step by step is going to take a little bit longer than a 30-second, here's the products, click, done project. We're not going to speed it up. We're going to go through each of these fundamentals in real time. Now, of course, if you are just getting started out, please just pause now and check what might be holding you back. I've got my apron on. I've got my towel ready to go, so I know I'm not wearing clothes that I'm worried about getting paint on. Sometimes that can hold you back. Sometimes we're worried about not having a lot of time, and sometimes we don't need it. We can break things down into small steps. We want these layers to dry between the different layers as well, so we don't need a lot of time. We can do it in small lots. So I really want you to think about what might be holding you back as we go through this. Like I said, we'll talk through all those different fundamental steps and then bring them together in a project. So let's jump in. Okay, I'll do my best to keep an eye on the comments as we go. So our very first thing, of course, is what paper we're using. And here we're starting with a Montmartre mixed media paper. Now this is our 300 GSM, so quite a heavy weight. And what I've done is cut it in half. So here I've got the paper here. You can see it's quite a thick piece. It's got a beautiful smooth top. Now we don't have this in stock at the moment, but we will soon. And then I've got my ephemera, so some old book pages, some notes, an old dictionary, some music, and of course my favourite gel medium. And for this, I'm going to use a brush. I'm going to get started with that to try and keep the mess to a minimum. So the first thing we want to do is set it aside and then get started. So get that lid off, get a little bit out. I'm just going to put a very thin layer onto the bottom. And you see, that's really not a lot. It's just enough. I'm going to get the light to catch that. Just enough to hold it down. Then we're going to put our first piece down. Now you can see I've already torn all these. I really love having torn edges. It helps it blend in. And then we're just going to put a small light layer over the top as well. Now that helps keep it from bending because it's got an even coverage. Then we're going to put another piece here. Again, a little bit down. Now I know we're talking about gesso. With using this sort of card paper, you really don't need gesso. You might use gesso if you were doing it on an old book page. It's something that needed a bit more of a foundation to start with. Or if we were doing it on cereal box cardboard, something like that, we might throw down a bit of gesso. But in this case, the gel mediums actually help to seal the page as well. So I'll put some music down here. Now you can see that I'm overlapping the pieces. I want to make sure that I'm overlapping them and then also having them come off the edge as well. We're not trying to get it all into the middle. We want to give it some length and breadth. And continue to do that and then build up over the top of it. And we want to connect them as well. So we want to create something that creates, a bit of a bridge between the different layers. I'm going to put some more here to help connect those two pieces. And then we're going to put some down here. Again, joining it up but having it coming off the bottom. So we've got length, we've got width, we've got it joining together. We've still got some areas there and then a little bit more in this corner. Put it down. Now again, if you don't have gel medium, you can certainly do something like this with a glue stick. Doesn't need to be a gel medium, but I do think once you're ready to get a bit more serious about it, investing in a really good gel medium is really going to help. It's really going to be a useful thing to have in your toolkit. Okay, so there we go. There are our first steps done. We've got our card, we've got our ephemera down with our gel medium. Now we're going to set this one aside, put this brush into some water before we move on to the next step. Okay, and I'm going to grab a baby wipe. so we're not making too much of a mess. Like I said, it doesn't have to take a lot of mess, but sometimes we do. Okay, so we've got our foundation down, and here's one I made earlier. So here's one, same card, same pieces of ephemera, already stuck down and completely dry. Now, it doesn't take a long time to dry, maybe, 20 minutes or so, but we do want to make sure it's dry before we start adding our next step. And our next step is paints. So let's get our paints up here. So we've got some acrylic paints. I've got my paint brushes. I've got an old sort of a meat tray that I use as a palette. And in this stage, we're going to be adding some stenciling as well. So I have that ready to go. And then first we wanted to talk about colour. So again, as we get comfortable with colour, thinking about using warm colours or cool colours. And here I've used one of the colour box cards to help me get inspired. So I've decided that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something that was purple with a little bit of green. So this card was perfect. And this is number 272. So once I've done that, I've gone and matched the paints with it and then swatched them. So again, we talked about getting to know our paints. So here, this is the book where I put all my notes for my work. I've got a piece of ephemera. I've then swatched the paints. I've made a note of what colours they are. So if I need to go back, I can find them. And I can see that they're actually quite opaque, especially this fur one. It's quite dark. I've then also gone and matched my inks that we'll be using later, and then looked at my markers and my water-soluble crayons as well. So that has all the colours there. I know that they're going to go together. We can see that I've used pretty close matches, and then I've also thrown this extra colour in as well. I thought it just needed something a bit brighter. And again, that's something that I've experimented with, and I know it's going to work. So these are the colours that we'll be using on this piece. Okay, now, so we've got our paints out. We're going to give them a shake. So we had our ephemera over the edge. So the next thing I want to do is remove that. Now I can either tear it away, or if you've got a little bit of an emery board, you can use that just for filing those pieces off as well. And that just gives it a really nice little edge, neatens it up a bit. Really good when you can't tear it exactly. And that can also be used for roughing up an edge as well to create interesting textures. So there we go, finished. So we're going to start with the lighter colours because we want to look at how we can create some space as well. Don't want it too solid. So I'm going to start with the heather because I know this is the lightest colour. Put just a little bit there on my palette. It doesn't need to be much. Sometimes I'll even just put it straight onto the art journal to get started, depending how I'm feeling. I'm going to start with a big brush because I want some big bold strokes. Now these are the Art by Marlene paint brushes, which I just love using, and they're dry, so I haven't got anything onto that. So I'm going to start by just creating some areas. Now because this is the lightest colour, I know I can splash it around a bit. If I'm thinking it's still a little bit solid, I can always just add that tiny bit of water to my paintbrush and make it a bit of a wash, but this is where you want to be careful. We don't want to make it too wet or too diluted because then we lose some of that colour. Now we're not worrying too much about colour placement here, just sort of using our odd numbers. So there we go. Then we'll use the next colour, which is this. So this first colour is the Dina Wakley Heather. This one's the Dilutions Laid Back Lilac. And again, a little bit onto our palette. Close up the lid, pop it out of the way. Dry paintbrush, a little bit of paint. And I'm just going to add, again, you don't have to do squares. Sometimes that's what I feel like. And again, we want to make sure we're getting the paint right off the edges as well. So that's why we've got something underneath it. Overlapping our colours a little bit. but because they're fairly dry, we know that they're not going to mix, and the colours all match, so we're not too worried about that. So we're just going to add a little bit here, a little bit there. Now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, so I might just add a little bit somewhere else. So just starting to think about that composition a little bit as well on those odd numbers. Okay, next we're going to add some of this orchid. So this is the Dina Wakley orchid, and again this is a much stronger colour, so we want to start being sort of mindful about how we use this and what it's going to block behind it. So with another clean paintbrush, where are we going to do it? Let's add a little bit here. Now depending on where you're creating and what time of year, sometimes this can dry really quickly. But we don't want to do too much mixing, we're just building up the layers with the paint. A little bit here. And of course we can come back in and add a little bit more. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Add a little bit more there. Or maybe we'll connect that through. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's add a little bit more there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, so we need to add a little bit more somewhere else. Let's just add it through there. So we're starting to think a little bit about composition, but again, not overthinking it. Just putting it in a few different places, overlapping it a bit, making sure it's drying as we go. Now can you see that's certainly getting fairly dry. We're not putting down a lot of paint at all. We're keeping our layers really light. So now we're going to pick up the green, and this is the Dina Wakley Peacock. And a little bit more because I'm going to use this one for some stenciling as well. So now I'll use this brush. Again, another dry brush. Looking at where we've got the paints, where else do we need to connect them? So you can still see those layers of ephemera underneath. We're using the paints to build up colour, but not trying to block out what we've got. Making sure we're going over those edges. Again, joining up those bits. Trying to keep the back clean as we go. Oh gosh, here. A little bit down here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. More might be enough. We'll come back to that colour. And then finally the fur. Now this is the really dark colour, so I'm going to use a much smaller brush for this. And I know from experience that, and that's why I start with the lighter colours, or start with lighter colours and then build it up, is that it's really easy for these darker colours to get a little bit carried away and take things over, and then we're really hard pressed to kind of balance it out because it comes quite solid really quickly. So you can see there how it's much, much darker than the other colours. We could add little bits, we could add different shapes, we can break this one up, overlap that, oh, maybe even overlap it onto that one. Like I said, you don't have to do it in sort of symmetrical shapes. You can do blobs. You can certainly blend it using some water or a kitchen towel or a baby wipe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just perhaps a few little pieces. Let's put a little bit here to help balance that up. Then maybe just a little bit more there. So there we go. At this point, we're starting to think about how much coverage we've got. We're certainly not adding any more different colours. We're going to stick with these colours. Do we want to add a little bit more of this in? And again, we really want to make sure that those top few layers are dry. And you can see they're not too bad. They are nearly dry. So what we're going to do at this same point in time is some stenciling. So here I've got 2 Art by Marlene stencils. This one's the dotty one, and this is the flower one I've just been having so much fun using lately. So perhaps let's start with this one, and I've got the new Art by Marlene sponges, or some makeup sponges. It doesn't matter too much what you use. Now, the challenge with stenciling, of course, is that less is more. So we want to make sure that we're not too heavy-handed, which is not my usual style or approach at all, but sometimes we just need to slow things right down. We're not in a hurry. And what we want to do is stencil and join some of these patches of colour together. So we're using the stenciling to help blend it. So I'm going to lay the stencil there at the angle, get my sponge, dab it in the paint, dab it off. I want to get just that little bit of paint, then start where I've already got that colour and then join it together through the stencil. Now this is a chance to go really light and build up those layers slowly. Now don't you need to use the whole stencil at all, just use that little bits of it. But using the stenciling to help blend those background layers together so it doesn't look quite so solid. Of course, the good thing about stenciling is you can carefully lift it up and check. So you can go, how's that look? And go, oh yeah. So we can see there that we've started to bring those colours together. We can see how it's starting to not look as solid as it does down here. Okay, so I might, while that is drying just a little bit, turn it around and do something similar but with the green on this side with the peacock. So getting another sponge. Now these sponges you want to make sure you rinse out, not immediately, but if you leave them and you can't really reuse them, the paint will just dry. But if you give it a good rinse, you'll definitely get a few uses out of it. So again, we want to go from this colour block that we've already got and expand it out. Slowly building up those layers. So now we've got our ephemera, our paint, and our stencils. So again, just lifting it up. And you can see how that's really starting to bring the background together. It's not looking like those solid blocks that we started off with. Okay. So let me know if you've got any questions, pop them in the comments. Lastly, I'm going to get some of this darker green and pop it through the middle. As you can see, this is my favourite dotty stencil at the moment and it's been used quite a bit. So I want to use it to connect these bits, doing them on a bit of an angle. Another sponge, dab in, dab off. And then slowly use it to build it up the colour. Now you can certainly just use one stencil, you can use more stencils, you can use hand cut stencils, you could use, so many things. Sequin scrap, that we talked about. If you've got, what am I trying to say, Michelle? Bubble wrap. Bubble wrap's really good for putting paint on for mark making as well. Okay, now let's lift that up. There we go, get that stencil out of the way. So it's really heading in the right direction. I'm happy with that. Now, there's always a point in your mixed media art where it kind of goes through the, I don't like saying ugly phase. I like saying like the awkward, gangly teenage phase. There's just that little bit as we go through it. We're going, oh my goodness, what am I doing? But rest assured, we know that this is going to work. We're going to continue on. So we've got our ephemera, we've got our paint block, we've got our stenciling in the 3 different colours, and we're going to let that dry while we think about our focal point. So let's set this one aside and move on to the next one. I'm going to pop my paintbrushes in the water and very carefully move those out of the way. We'll set that one aside to dry. And again, here's another one I prepared earlier. So we've got our ephemera, our paint blocks, our stencils. Now we want to think about our stamping and our image. So I've got a couple of stamp sets here and my favourite inks. Now I've already swatched these as we talked about earlier, so I know these are going to match my paint colours. I love not only doing the stenciling colour on colour, I like stamping it with the same colours as well because it creates interesting depth and textures. So let's see. We want to put in just a little bit of stamping to make us interesting. So let's start off with some words, because words are always good. This one you can sort of read. Why am I always having trouble getting this up the right way? Was it this one? Oh, maybe because it was this one I used last time. Anyway, not to worry. It's always good to have a little bit of writing. And we're going to do this in nice pink. So again, we're using archival inks because we know it's waterproof. Once it's dry, as we put things on top, we know that it won't smudge. It'll be good to go. Now I've put this on top of an acrylic block. I'm going to stamp it there. And it took a while to realise if you want this layers and this depth in mixed media art, then you've got to put it in. You can't just expect, ironically, your layers to turn up. Now you can see there we've got some ink. It's going across the different colours, but then it's also going across those lighter spaces as well. And again, you just need to experiment and decide how you like it to look. If you don't like the tone on tone, then you can certainly go with a grey or a black if you want it to stand out a little bit more. I said make sure we're going over the edges, doing a bit of ghost stamping. Okay, what else have we got here? Oh, we've got this really cute little compass. Now something like this I'll do in a darker colour. We're happy for this to stand out a little bit more because we don't have too much of the darker colour on it. And again, buddying these up. So 1, 2 and 3. That's definitely enough for now. I'm going to give that just a quick wipe. You can see these stamps have been well used. What else have I got? I've got this really cute little postage stamp. I'm going to do this in the grey. Again, I really love, this is the watering can grey. I love using grey when you think black's going to just be a little bit too solid. And again, thinking about where it still needs something. Especially in those parts where we've got a little bit less paint, a little bit of extra ink won't go astray. Then rather than waste that ink, we'll stamp it off. Okay, what else? What else? What else? I've also got these really fun little shapes from the Art by Marling Essentials. And these are also good ideas for when we're doing a doodling as well. So using circles, like using circles. So their ways just give us some fun little ideas. I'm going to use the Paradise Teal, which is a really good match for that peacock. And again, looking at where we need to join blocks. So any bits that look like they're missing stuff. Looks like I've managed to get a bit of paint over there, of course. Not to worry. And this ink dries fairly quickly as well, so we don't need to be too worried about it. And again, I'm putting them quite up and down or sideways, completely up to you. How do you like to use them? How many times you use them? See, sticking to odd numbers. And then just for that last little bit, I haven't really got any purple stamping yet, so we might use this one, which is a really fun circly one. And again, these fun little ink pads are a great way to get lots of little colours. You can get them all in the large ones as well, but the mini ones are good for travelling, good for getting a range of colours. Where else do we need something? Maybe down through here. Okay, so now I'm looking at where the colours are, where I've got things. Am I missing anything? Maybe this corner could have a little bit more. Again, we don't have to use the whole stamp, just like we don't have to use the whole stencil. Stamp over the edge. Seeing where we've got dark bits, where we've got some lighter bits. Again, a little bit light over here. So let's stamp that. think we are good in the stamping department. And again, how do you know when to stop is always the challenge. Just continue along until you've had enough of that. I'll get those out of the way. If we finished with the inks, I'm not quite sure. We'll sit them over here. So we've got our layers, we've got our paints, we've got our stencils, we've got our stamps. I think we're ready to think about adding a focal point. Yay! So, again, we talked about there's lots of places we can get focal points. We can use photos, we can use our own drawings. Today I'm using an image from the book, one of Art by Marlene's, and there's so many different things in there. So I've gone through and pull out a few bits and pieces that I want to use. So I've got this little girl, I've got that. She had a bow that I seem to have lost already. Oh, I keep moving things around. That's going to get what's going to happen, isn't it? So I've got this. Now these have a little bit of an edge around it. So what I'm going to do is normally I would trim it off, but it seems I don't have my scissors. Where did they end up? Okay, hold on for just one tick and I will go and grab them. Here I am, never worry. Best laid plans always go astray, don't they? I'm sure I had some scissors here somewhere. So because this does have a bit of a border around it, I'm just going to give her a little bit of a trim. Sometimes the white gives it a particular look. Sometimes when I'm trying to blend it into an art journal, I'd rather not have it there. So I'm not a huge fan of fussy cutting. Sometimes your images you do need to cut out, and again, some people love it, find it meditative. I'm really just ready to get on with paints and inks and not really want to do much cutting. Because it's hair, it doesn't need to be too accurate. We'll just take the white off it. There we go. And then she's got some writing around her too, so I'm going to leave that. So just trim it down that little bit. And then remember we talked about using that paper towel trick of edging it. So I'm going to use the grey, and I've got my sponge underneath. I could put it on the sponge holder, but I'm just going to use my fingers and just take it around the edge to take that white edge off it a little bit. And I might even put a little bit on that writing because we want the writing there. We don't want it to stand out too strongly. So just edging it. Now this could be with a pencil, it could be with a paint marker. Just got to be very careful with paint markers. They're very good at slipping. At least this, if it slips, it's not quite as solid. It's not going to leave a big mark. You can see how that just helps take the white off. So we've got that. We've also got some flowers. So likewise, take some of that extra edge off. And you'll get to know the images that you like. Some of them have been die cut, so you don't need to worry about it. Others you do need to fussy cut. So again, it depends on how accurate you like to be. Sometimes the edging gives it a really nice little look because it helps lift it from the page. I tend to like embedding it in. So again, using that watering can grey ink. And we know it's waterproof, so it's not going to smudge. There we go. And then lastly, this word, I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to put any colour on that now. I think we'll do that once we embed it. So popping the lid back on, popping that away, wiping my fingers. So now we've got our focal point. We just want to think about where we're going to put it. So we've got our page. Now I've created a little template to help explain what I'm talking about when I talk about thirds. So I've drawn this up. This is a piece of cereal plastic from the cereal box, pulled apart and washed. Now I've marked the corners and then marked it in thirds so we can see it gives us these points. So I'd like to put my lady, and again, we don't have to decide, we can audition them. So would she look better here or here or here? Now the thing's, because she doesn't have a full body, I can put her here and maybe create the rest of her body, or I could put her down here. Certainly considering putting her eyes on that line as well. And then again with the words, we could put it there. We could use it there. But I think I'm going to put her down here with my flowers. So again, we're going to use our favourite gel matte medium. And this time I'm not going to use a brush, I'm just going to use a bit on my finger. We want to go around. Now you can see why it's so important that we're using waterproof ink, because if that was going to run, we'd make a big mess of it. Now, of course, we could do it without making such a mess, but where's the fun in that? And because it does dry matte, I don't have to be too worried about getting it exactly where I need it. I know I can just put it down, putting it in that spot, and then putting that layer across the top. And by using my finger, I can really feel, now particularly if I was doing tissue or rice paper, I'd be much more careful, but this is a bit thicker paper, so I don't need to be quite as concerned. I'm going to add my flowers here. That will help us anchor her down. And then the words. So like I said, we were thinking about that. Do I add them here? I might add them up here. And again, they could be straight, but I'm going to put them in a little bit of an angle. And then again, sealing that over. Now, another good reason for using your fingers rather than a paintbrush is paintbrushes will quite often leave marks or lines. And again, it doesn't really matter. We're creating interesting techniques with our layers, with our mixed media. But I do find if you don't want that, then you can get your finger just a little bit damp with a bit of water. You don't want too much because we don't want to add too much more moisture in it. And then just smooth over her face, and that will help not take out all the marks, but certainly will take out a lot more of them than if we used a paintbrush. So we've got our image, we've trimmed it, we've edged it with a little bit of watering can, waterproof archival ink, and then we've popped her down there with a layer of gel medium both below and on top to help seal it. Okay, now we are going to let her dry and bring in another one I finished earlier. So we're ready to add our finishing touches. We've got our ephemera layer, our paint layer, our stencil layer, our stamping layer, our focal point with a bit of layering down in this bottom third, our words, which are there at the top, and we now can start thinking about finishing it off. Now we do want to make sure that this is completely dry, partly because we don't want to ruin our work, and also because we don't want to ruin our good paint pens. I'm sure all of you that have done mixed media for a while have managed to ruin at least one good paint pen by not being patient. So here are some things to play with. I've got my favourite Life of Colour paint markers. I've got some Dina Wakley crayons. I've got some scrap paper so I can check my markers are working, and I've got a little bit of water to activate my water-soluble crayons. Now let me create a little bit more space. So the first thing we're going to do is embed our image into our background a little bit, and we talked about doing that by creating a horizon and some shadows. So looking here, I can see I've already got a little bit of a horizon in my background, so I'm going to use that. So I'm going to start off with, this is the marine, so it's the dark blue. I'm not going with black. I find that black just gets a little bit too solid. Now I'm going to dampen my paintbrush, a bit of kitchen towel because I don't want it to be too wet. And then I'm going to use that to water activate it. And you can see how it goes quite a bit darker. And again, as you get to know your different crayons, you'll know which ones you can use more of, which ones you can use less of. And I know that this will still be see-through, so I'm not worried about covering it up. What I'm trying to do is create a bit more darkness so you can still see what's going on behind it. But it's helping it anchor, give her place. Now she's also got a top. I might considering continuing that. So I'll find my fine black one. Again, give it a really good shake. These have already been primed. When you do get your Life of Colour or your Posca pens, give yourself some time, not just straight jumping into playing with them, but priming them first because they need to be done properly. The instructions are on the containers, but it's really frustrating if you want to jump into things and you're not quite ready. So again, we want to continue this, but taking this line and continuing it down. We've already got some green there behind her. So nothing too fancy. We've already got some green lines, so maybe we'll use the green pen, although we've already got green paint as well. Now, these paint markers do take that little bit to dry as well, so we do want to be just that little bit careful or we know we're going to smudge it. And putting some lines through to continue that pattern. And then continuing it here. And this is where you can really start making the piece your own. If you've used a slightly different coloured green, we can add that on top so the greens match a lot better. We can just do our own little bit of drawing just to start making it our own. So we can see just by giving it that horizon and start to give it the place, it helps. Now we want to go back to giving her a bit more shadow. So sometimes we might do this by drawing around it and then activating it. Another way of doing it, if you want to keep it really light, is wetting your paintbrush and then just rubbing it onto your water-soluble crayon. And that gives you a much lighter wash. You can then go around. You want it a little bit on her so it doesn't look, so she's looking a little bit more 3D. But again, we're not creating a lifelike picture, we're just trying to embed our image into it so she doesn't look quite so. Now I might even put some of this shadow onto those words because we want it to be shining through, but we don't want it to look too bright. And this bit you could just play and play and play. There we go. So we can already see by creating that really soft shadow, and probably, in a few places, the shoulder we might want to add it, make it a little bit darker. Now I've got wet crayon on my hands. Sorry. Making it a little bit darker, and we can build it up slowly. Especially shadows can sometimes look really dark until we get the hang of them. So sometimes they can look a bit dark. We can wipe them away, build them up. And also, we'll have a bit of a shadow under her chin, so we can add just that tiny bit there. A little bit here under her hair. So really using the photo as the guide. What's going on? As the guide for adding that little bit more colours and making it look really cohesive. Now I've added a bow, so we can add a little bit of colour there. And really, this is the bit I've learnt by feeling. We want to create that horizon. A bit more on this side. And then just slowly building it up. And you can see how much lighter it gets once it dries. Okay, now let's let that dry and we have a think about what else we might want to do. So we talked about using our colours in the background, and we really do want that to dry before we go much further. Let's just flop that off a little bit. Okay, so we've already got some circles there. Do we want to enhance those circles? So again, we might want to add to them. And we've got 3, but perhaps we want to add another couple in. We've got circles there. We've already got some lines. We could add to the line. Just creating some little features. Maybe adding some crosses. Again, we want to make sure we've got odd numbers. So like we've had stitching, you can of course add stitching. This, I think we're going to want to take a bit of the white out, but I'm a bit worried. Sometimes we can just add, because this is water soluble, paint marker, not water soluble, we can add a bit on, and then if we're quick about it, and because we have sealed it already with a gel medium, see how we can use our finger to smudge it, and it's starting to take that white off it, so it's not looking quite as solid. You do need to be careful with this, or before you know it, you can have lost your words, and we want them still there. We don't want to take them away altogether, but we don't want them to stand out quite so much on this white background either. So again, using that as a guide, and then it's got that little bit of more of the pink in the middle. So we'll again shake the pink one up, perhaps clean off that finger or use a different one. And you can see how you can just slowly build up those colours so it really does take some of that white away. So it's not looking quite as stark, it's looking much more like a part of your artwork. Okay, so pink, we might want to add a little bit more pink to her lips. A little bit more pink to her hair. Again, just following some of the lines that are around, adding the colour in so that it looks much more cohesive. Now this works really well if you've got a piece that is really quite different in the colours. So you've got a pink, but it's quite a different pink. So here we've got purple. So where can we add in some purple? Add just a few dots in over here. And then adding a little bit more into her bow. Again, just to bring in those colours. And I think we're getting close to nearly being finished. Probably want to add a little bit more white in here. But I know it's not going to look the same. So rather than trying to get it to match, let's just give it the impression of a bit more of white here. Oh, but now that we've got the white, of course, we can add a few more highlights. Now that's quite wet, so we do want to make sure we definitely let that sit and dry. We can add in some white dots. So perhaps just in here, just those little highlights. Again, we've got a bow, so we can add in some highlights on the bow. Again, just using that picture as your guide. Of course, the whites of her eyes, always something we want to add back in. A bit on her nose. Now I know I'm going to add some gold here as well, so I don't want to add too many white highlights. Okay. And then the last, a little metallic always looks good as well. So whether that's a paint marker or whether that's just some paint or metallic ink. So I'm going to add some dots through here. You can certainly add splatters. I'm not going to do that here because I'm worried that it will make too much of a mess. Now I might even add a few little gold dots to her top. Just there, like a little brooch. Again, we can add some dots on the flower. Where else? So I've sort of got there, we add some up here somewhere. What would make sense? Let's just do a few little lines. Just that little bit like that. And again, it's a paint marker. We want to give it some time. Now we've got some purple, some purple dots, whether we need a few more pink dots around here. And you find things that you like adding. Now, whether it's dots or crosses or just some more shading, it really, you can have a play with it and decide what you like to do, what makes sense for your type of artwork. You might decide that you don't like it so solid. You might want to leave more white space. You might want to tell more of a story, add some of your own words in. So we've got a little bit of a border here where we need a little bit more. We could do some of our scribbly writing once we're happy that that's dry. So we can do some of our scribbly writing to help reinforce that horizon. And then a little bit on this side as well. And then I think we're nearly finished. The last thing I want to do is add a border. So let's decide, what are we going to do with the border? I could certainly use the scribble stick. I don't know if I've got the patience for that now. I think I'm going to, this is our darkest ink, I'm going to use that to create a border. So just really simple direct to paper around the outside. Now, if we wanted it a little bit lighter, of course, I could have used a sponge. But sometimes it just gets to this point and I've really had enough. Just want to get it finished off. Ready for a cup of tea. And there we go. I think that's nearly done. Now, of course, the very last thing we need to do, if we've decided we've finished it, is dated it and signed it. And I'm going to very carefully do that with my black paint marker down here. Somewhere that's not too conspicuous, so I'm going to do MB and I'll do 23. So there we go. Our mixed media art fundamentals, we've put it all together. We've got our mixed media card. It could be done in an art journal or on a canvas. We've got some ephemera down with our gel medium. We've got our paint layers. We've chosen some colours. We've done some stenciling. We've done some stamping. We've got our focal point and some words. And then we've done the finishing touches by adding a horizon, adding some highlights, adding a border, some doodling, and then finished it all off. I hope that has given you some ideas. It's given you something to be a bit more confident with if you're starting out in your mixed media art journaling, and hopefully putting some words to some things that you've thought about when you've created. So a little bit about composition, colour, about bringing elements together, and then hopefully just having fun. Well, there we go. Wasn't that so much fun? Really looking at how we tie all of that together by taking those fundamentals, looking through all of those questions. Now, if you are just starting out, I would encourage you to experiment, play through the rules and the parts as I've showed you, and then decide which bit you like or which bit you don't like. Throw those away and try something different. Maybe you don't like adding figures into your work. You'd much rather use a butterfly or a flower, or maybe you're happy with it more abstract. You don't need a focal point, or you want to use words. There's just so many different options, but I really hope you've enjoyed this journey of mixed media art fundamentals, answering all of your questions of what you need to get started in mixed media art. Now, of course, pop your questions in the comments, give us a like, a thumbs up, subscribe, share us with your crafty friends, and I look forward to catching up with you soon. This is Michelle signing off. I hope you have a crafty day.